Yeah, are we done with insurance, please? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so the principal residence exemption. So I bought 2 rentals. There was a point in my life where I thought I was going to be like a real estate like emperor of some kind, you know? Like you read these books about the returns on real estate and all this kind of stuff. I was like, yeah, I'm going to build this real estate empire.
Because you can touch the walls and the bricks.
That's right. It's tangible. And I would go every week and I would just pet the walls of my rental and I would say, there you are. There you are.
Real asset.
Yeah. This is before the rational reminder, of course, and before I smartened up, but it was too late by then. I'd already bought 2. And they were pre-sale. One was a condo and one was a townhouse. One was a pre-sale condo in Vancouver and one was a townhouse here in Squamish. The condo I never lived in. It was purely a rental the whole time. Interestingly enough, that one just never really went up in value. We bought it in 2016. I sold it in 2023. So call it 7 years. And I made basically nothing on it. Like, yeah, we had rents, of course, but the value didn't really increase. No, in Vancouver.
Vancouver?
Yeah, 1-bedroom condo in Vancouver, East Vancouver.
How did you find the one condo in Vancouver that didn't go up in value?
I was going to say.
Well, it's funny because when you look at all like the private real estate funds, they seem to only find the ones that go up in value and not go down in value. And I seem to at least find the one that doesn't go up in value. So somebody's got to be buying the ones that I bought, I guess, right?
That's wild.
Yeah, it did go up a little bit, but it was basically a wash after the GST because in BC you have to pay GST on new purchases. So I had to pay GST and you factor in like realtor commissions and stuff, and it was basically a wash, right?
Wow.
It's kind of like the private credit funds. They also only find loans that increase in value over time. It's interesting how private funds tend to find those
deals.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very
so
impressive.
I'm the opposite. I can only find the ones that. Now, having said that, the one in Squamish did really, really well, and purely by dumb luck, right? Like COVID had a lot to do with that, I think, because here in Squamish, a lot of people left Vancouver during COVID to work from home, and I think a lot of people that wanted to live here who couldn't because of the commute or chose not to because of the commute, now that they were working from home, they came to Squamish, and so we saw a really, really big increase in real estate prices. So given that the condo in Vancouver was a wash, we'll just talk about the townhouse. So we bought the pre-sale in 2016, late 2016, and it completed in early 2019. And technically, when you buy a pre-sale, you don't actually own the property until it's completed, right? It's kind of like a call option. Like there's features of a call option in there, I would say. Like you have the right to buy it when it's complete. It's a little bit harder to sell than a call option would be, but you basically are buying the right to move into it when it's done.
It's
right?
not yours until closing.
Basically. So for the purpose of calculating the principal residence exemption and ownership, you don't really own it until 2019, even though you've technically kind of bought it in 2016 in my case. So it was complete in 2019, and when it completed, we moved into it. So February 2019, we moved into the townhouse, and we did this just to kind of test if we liked Squamish because we were moving from Vancouver, and we decided we wanted to stay. So in April of 2020, about 14 months later, we bought a home here for ourselves in Squamish, but we kept the townhouse as a rental. So April 2020, we turned it into a rental until we sold it in the summer of last year, 2023.
I've got a quick question. Did you do an appraisal when you turned it into a rental?
No. And so this was a really interesting topic that came out of some of the discussions when I wrote this on Twitter. And in hindsight, I think I kind of lucked out because what you can do is you can appraise it and then you can submit it like a change of use. And you can kind of basically tell CRA, I'm turning this into a rental now, right? So then you lose the ability to claim the principal residence exemption the same way. And I can only claim it for those 2 calendar years that I lived in it, 2019 and 2020. It's only those 2 years that I can kind of eliminate in terms of the growth of the property. But a lot of the growth of the property happened after I turned it into a rental, like from 2020 to 2023 is where a lot of the growth was. And so thankfully I didn't submit a change of use for that property. And as a result, it worked out in my favor even better. But to your point, you can do that. You can get an appraisal. So let's say I bought it for, I'm just going to make up numbers here, but let's say I bought it for $600,000 in 2019 and it went up to $700,000 in 2020. That $100,000, you can submit a change of use. That $100,000 is exempt from tax because it's your principal residence for those 2 calendar years. And then from 2021 onwards, it would all be taxable. When you do that, you're not able to kind of average out the total growth of the property over the years you owned it because you're basically saying it's these 2 years of gains that that I'm claiming as the principal residence exemption. The way we did it was a little bit different because I didn't do that, and I'll get into the details, but because I didn't do that, when we sold it in 2023, we owned it for 5 calendar years, 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022, and 2023.
Yep.
We lived in them for 2 calendar years, 2019 and 2022. But the way the principal residence exemption is calculated is they give you what I call the +1. So if you actually look at the formula, there's a +1 in the formula. So the actual formula is the number of years it was your principal residence +1 divided by the number of years you owned the home times the capital gain. That's how much you are exempt for for the capital gains. So in my case, I lived in it for 2 calendar years out of 5 that I owned it, but I get to add +1 to those 2 calendar years. So I owned it I lived in it rather for 2 calendar years. I get to add +1. So 3 calendar years divided by the 5 years that I owned it is 60%. That's how much of the capital gains exempt. And the reason for the +1 is to account for the fact that people own 2 principal residences in a single year when they move, right? Like in my case, we owned that home in 2020 plus the home we live in now in 2020. So they give you the +1 as a way to account for those calendar years where you own 2 homes as a principal residence. But it's just fascinating the way it worked out, where it exempted 60% of the capital gain. Mm-hmm. What's even better though is I didn't lose any of the capital gains or the principal residence exemption on my current house, because even though I've already claimed 2020 I've already claimed that townhouse as my principal residence for 2020. When I go to sell this place, 2020 is off the docket. I can't use 2020 against this house. I can only use 2021 and onward. But because of the +1, I can basically recapture the calendar year of 2020. And so if I sell it, say 10 years from now, let me just find the formula here again. But if I sell it after owning it for 10 years, I get 9 years where I can claim it as my principal residence. I can't use 2020 anymore. But because of the +1, I get
it back.
10 years divided by the number of years I owned it, which is 10. So it'll be 100% exempt from tax.
That's cool.
Yeah, it was just a really interesting outcome, I guess. And then we used RSPs, and both my spouse and I owned that property. And because she has no income, half the capital gain was hers. And so the way it all worked out is net as a family, we ended up with about a $3,000 tax refund last year, even though that property went up by quite a bit.
Super interesting.
So the key is the change of use notification. That would have locked in the gains at that point in time.
Yes, exactly. So had I submitted a change in use instead, 2019 and 2020 would have been exempt from tax. Yeah. 2021 to 2023 would not have. But because most of the growth happened in 2021 to 2023, I would have got pinched for the big growth years. Yeah. And I think there's a really interesting 4-year look back rule, which always confuses me. I don't know if you guys have heard of this, but if you move out of your home and turn it into a rental and you later sell it, you can actually go back 4 years and claim it as your principal residence, even though it wasn't your principal residence and you turned it into a rental. Now you would lose the principal residence exemption on the current home you live in. And so for me, I didn't want to do that. That didn't make sense. But even if you turn it into a rental, you get like this 4-year window where you can still claim it as a principal residence. I might have that wrong, so somebody will probably correct me on the forums, which they like to do lately, apparently. Hey, Ben?
Just a little bit. People, you ruffled feathers with some of your physician-related content.
Yeah, the headline specifically, but
yeah,
all good.
So do we want to take a stab at this next question?
Yeah, I mean, my answer to this question is super simple, but let's do it.
I think all of ours will be pretty simple and nobody will be surprised. So Ben, how would you invest $1 billion today?
I would put all of it in DFA 607, which is Dimensional's Canadian global equity portfolio. Basically, global market cap weights with a Canadian home bias with a small cap and value tilt across all stocks in the world. That's how I invest my money now, and I would do the exact same thing.
Lump sum, no dollar cost average, Check
Lump
comes in
sum.
today. Order goes in tomorrow for the full billion.
See you later. Place
I
the
mean, a
trade.
billion's so much, right, that you could live with volatility, like especially the spending habits that the three of us have. I thought I'd do 70-30, but the number's so big. Like, I'd do something either 607 or whatever the 70-30 code is, something like that, and be done with it. I have no interest in doing private equity or finding other fancy investments or real estate. Like, simple, man, it's just a thing of beauty to me. And markets work. I remember your tweet, Mark, where you said something like, if I had $1,000, how would I invest? If I had 10,000, and you scaled it up, and it was the same answer all the way along, globally diversified index type portfolio. And I completely agree with that. Especially this philosophy is all about the fact that markets work.
Yeah.
And the markets are so much bigger than if any one of us had $1 billion.
Yeah.
So
Well, that's
why
the
not?
question, right? Like, is $1 billion enough to move prices? But if you're handing it over to an institutional manager, I guess they've got a lot, easier ways to enter. But if you were buying like a single stock with $1 billion, that could move the price. But
So
The
what
stock,
would you
how
do?
much is-
the whole
Right.
life, the whole thing, whole life policies for my kids. Obviously, I thought that was obviously. No, I would be half whole life and half Bitcoin actually. But no, I don't know. I don't think it's interesting, Cameron. What you just said is that you can just accept the volatility when you have that much money, right? Like depending on how you spend. But I think there's also the question of do you need to take that kind of risk as well? And if you define risk as volatility, which I know most of us don't, but I think like could you look at your statement and see negative 200 million on the statement over a few
Wouldn't
month
look at
period? Yeah, fair enough.
Don't look at it now.
Yeah.
I've looked at my accounts and I don't know when the last time I looked was.
Yeah.
I don't even know how much is in there. I know how
Same.
much I put in there every year. I don't know how much is in there though.
Yeah.
Honestly couldn't tell you. Probably couldn't tell you within tens of thousands of dollars at least.
So you're doing your own homemade volatility laundering, basically.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Basically.
That's it. The only reason I have an idea is because I had to take money out for this landscape project, and it was the first time I checked in a long time, and it was much higher than I thought it would be because I hadn't checked in a long time. The markets have been pretty good. I was like, oh. But the problem with that is when the landscaper started going like, oh, do you want this? Do you want this? Do you want this? And the bill started going up. I was like, yeah, I can afford that because I saw my portfolio and things are going well, right? So it kind of reframed my decision to spend more on this project. But I think it's interesting for very wealthy people, somebody who's just landed with $1 billion in their lap, their capacity to take risk goes up exponentially, but their need to take risk goes down exponentially. And so I wonder if that decision comes down to tolerance for risk more than anything else.
Yeah. Willingness to take it on, as Larry Swedrow would say.
Yeah,
How willing are
exactly.
you?
But my answer is the same as you guys, and I don't want listeners to actually think I would buy whole life in Bitcoin. It would be DFA 607 as well. Just globally diversified index fund portfolio of some kind with dimensional funds. Obviously, we have the factor tilts.